the principal problem we're facing is that we consistently misunderstand what Russia is and what drives its behavior in both in the region and globally. So let me put it up front, and Dalibor already highlighted that. Russia is a quintessentially revisionist state. It is aligned today with three other powers: Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. I call those four the axis of dictatorships. We could debate whether or not there are things bringing them together other than the opposition and the intention on overthrowing the international system put in place by the United States and its democratic allies after the Cold War. I would submit to you that for over 2 decades now, Russia has been relitigating the post-Cold War settlement, driven by its determination to restore the inner core of its former empire and to establish a sphere of influence in Central and Eastern Europe and beyond. The war in Ukraine is not a sui generis event. It is a manifestation of Vladimir Putin's drive to restore Veliki Ruski Mir, Pax Russica, to put it differently, that is rooted in the fundamentals of Russian thinking about geopolitics and strategy that informed formative experience as an empire. This strategic culture sees the empire as rooted in the Eastern Slavic core of 3 nations: the Great Russians, as they call themselves, the Little Russians, as they refer to the Ukrainians sometimes, or Ukrainians, and the Belarusians. Russian imperialism perceives itself to be in fundamental civilizational opposition to the West, the roots of which go back to the 19th century and the introduction of the official national policy that rested on 3 principles at that time: the Orthodox faith, autocracy, and what they called nationality, narodnost, whereby nationality meant walling off the empire from the West and fighting foreign influences alien to Russia and the Russian national ideal. The triad that came to be known as the official nationalism in the 19th century became the dominant ideological doctrine of the Russian Empire, and it generated a policy of Russification in the 19th century of all non-Russian imperial lands. I bring this bit of history up here to make the following point. Today, in my view, there are persistent echoes of this ideology and Putin's insistence that, quote, there is no such thing as a Ukrainian nation, unquote, and his focus on Eurasianism as a pathway to de-Westernize Russia. Moscow's overarching objective is to reconquer its near abroad by relying on military power to score geopolitical wins and restore itself as a great power in other theaters as well. This process began in 2008 with the Russian invasion of Georgia, in the aftermath of which Moscow severed 2 provinces, Abkhazia and South Ossetia. It continued with the 2014 seizure and incorporation of Crimea, Moscow's entry into Syria in 2015, and most recently with the second invasion of Ukraine in 2022. I want to underscore that even before Russia launched its military conquest, it had already been shaping the battlefield, so to speak, through information operations, cyber attacks, espionage, and attempts at elite bribery and corruption, with the objective of achieving partial elite capture across the region. As I have written elsewhere, Russia is already in what I call phase 0 of a protracted conflict with the West, targeting Eastern and Central Europe and the Baltic states as its near-term strategic objectives, and planning a long game to force the United States and its European allies to accept Russia's status as a major power in Europe, entitled to an exclusive sphere of domination in Eastern Europe and a sphere of privileged interest in Central Europe, including in the countries that are members of NATO and the European Union today. At a risk of over-rationalizing history, I submit that there are striking parallels between the trajectory followed by Germany after its defeat in World War I and the road Russia has traveled since the end of the Cold War. In both cases, the dominant narrative produced for domestic consumption during the Weimar Republic in Germany and the Yeltsin decade in Russia was one of betrayal rather than defeat. In Germany, the so-called Dolchstoßlegende, the stab-in-the-back myth, claim that Germany was never defeated, but rather was betrayed. In Russia, Putin has offered the population a similar narrative, blaming the West for the alleged treachery that brought down the Soviet Union. I bring this up because that imperial narrative, much as it led to the rise of Hitler in Germany, continues to sustain Putin's revisionism in Central and Eastern Europe. According to this view, the great Russian nation was robbed of its greatness by the United States and by the West. And hence, any action to remedy this perceived injustice is justified in the eyes of Russian imperialists. Hence, I would submit the threat Russia poses to Central and Eastern Europe and to peace and stability worldwide more broadly will not abate as long as the Russian revisionist narrative holds. Till then, Russia will remain a chronic threat to the United States and to its allies. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions and the discussion.